We are going to begin tonight with a potential break in one of the greatest mysteries in all of American history. I'm talking about the hunt for the true identity of D.B. Cooper.
On November 24th, 1971, a man boarded a plane, handed over a note claiming he had a bomb, and walked away with $200,000 before parachuting into the night. Known only as D.B. Cooper, he vanished, leaving behind a 54-year mystery that gripped the world. Then, in 2025, scientists declared they'd cracked it.
We just solved it. Literally. This is the rig because they know what rig he used when he jumped that night.
Pointing to Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. with evidence that's hard to ignore. How did they finally solve it? What kept this case alive so long? Stick around. This is more than a heist. It's a puzzle unraveled by time and tech. So, let's set the scene. It's November 24th, 1971, Thanksgiving Eve, and the world's about to meet a guy who's going to pull off something no one's ever done before or since. A man calling himself Dan Cooper walks into Portland International Airport. He's got a one-way ticket to Seattle, a cheap clip-on tie, and a briefcase that's about to change everything. He's in his mid-40s, brown eyes, black hair, dressed like he's heading to a dull office job. Nothing about him screams criminal mastermind, but that's exactly what he is. He boards Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a Boeing 727, with 36 passengers and 6 crew members, and settles into seat 18C. The plane takes off at 2:50 p.m., and for a while, it's just another flight. Then, about 20 minutes in, Cooper lights a cigarette. Yeah, you could smoke on planes back then, and hands a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She thinks it's a passenger hitting on her, so she slips it into her pocket without looking. Cooper leans over and says, "Miss, you'd better read that. I have a bomb." Her heart probably stops right there. She unfolds the note, and sure enough, it's a calm typed message saying he's got explosives and wants $200,000 in cash, about $1.5 million today, plus 4 parachutes. No funny business, no marked bills, just the money and the gear, or everyone's done for. He even shows her the briefcase, red wires, a battery, something that looks like dynamite. Whether it's real or not, she's not about to test it. The plane's still in the air, circling over Puget Sound while the crew radios this nightmare to the ground. Cooper's cool as ice, sipping a bourbon and soda, chatting with the attendants like he's on a business trip. Meanwhile, the FBI and airline execs scramble in Seattle. They've got no choice. 36 lives are on the line, so they gather the cash in $20 bills, serial numbers recorded, and round up 4 parachutes, 2 main ones and 2 reserves. By 5:45 p.m., the plane lands at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. Cooper lets the passengers go, keeping the crew as leverage. The money and parachutes are brought aboard, and he inspects them like he's shopping for groceries. Satisfied, he tells the pilots to refuel and head for Mexico City, but with some weird conditions. Fly at 10,000 feet, keep the speed at 200 knots, landing gear down, flaps at 15 degrees. Oh, and don't pressurize the cabin. He's got plans. The plane takes off again at 7:40 p.m., heading south. Cooper's alone in the back now, the crew locked in the cockpit. Around 8:13 p.m., somewhere over southwestern Washington, near the Columbia River, a light flickers on the control panel. The aft staircase is lowering. He's doing it. With the wind howling at 170 knots, Cooper grabs 2 parachutes, ties the money bag to his waist, and jumps into a stormy, freezing night. The plane feels a jolt, but keeps flying. When it lands in Reno, Nevada at 10:15 p.m., he's gone. All that's left? A black J.C. Penney tie, a tie clip, and 8 cigarette butts. The FBI launches a manhunt, codenamed Norjack, combing the dense forests of Washington. Nothing. No body, no parachute, no money. Well, almost. In 1980, an 8-year-old kid named Brian Ingram finds $5,800 of the ransom cash, soggy and buried on a Columbia River beach called Tina Bar. It's a clue, but it only deepens the mystery. Who was this guy? Did he survive? For 54 years, those questions burned, until 2025 gave us some answers. Now that you've got the wild tale of Cooper's jump, you might wonder, how does a guy just disappear like that? The FBI wondered too, and they threw everything at it. Operation Norjack was massive. Agents, helicopters, ground teams tearing through Washington's rugged wilderness. The jump zone was a nightmare. Thick woods, steep hills, rivers, and a storm that night with winds up to 30 knots and temperatures below freezing. Cooper's in a suit and loafers, no helmet, no survival gear. Most figured he didn't make it, but no body turned up, and that kept the case alive. They interviewed over 1,000 people, passengers, crew, anyone who might have seen him. The sketches went out: medium build, olive skin, short hair. Witnesses said he seemed calm, polite even, like he'd done this before. But no one recognized him. The FBI had a few early leads. That tie he left behind. They tested it for fingerprints, fibers, anything. The cigarette butts got DNA samples, but back in the 70s, that tech was basic. Nothing conclusive. The $5,800 from Tina Bar was a bombshell in 1980, proving some of the money made it to the ground. But how'd it get there? Did Cooper bury it and die later? Did he lose it mid-jump? Theories piled up. Some thought he was a Boeing worker. His flight specs showed he knew the 727's rear stairs could drop in flight, a rare detail. Others pegged him as a military guy, maybe a paratrooper with jump skills. Over the years, they chased suspects like crazy. Dwayne Weber, a con man, whispered, "I'm Dan Cooper," on his deathbed in 1995. His widow swore it was him, but DNA didn't match. Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam vet and pilot, looked the part and had the skills, but he denied it, and evidence fizzled. Then there's Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. We'll dig into him later. He pulled a near-identical hijacking in 1972, parachuting over Utah with $500,000. The FBI nabbed him fast, but ruled him out for Cooper. Too young at 29, blue eyes instead of brown, blonde hair, not black. Still, his name lingered. By 2016, the FBI was exhausted. After 45 years, 800 suspects, and a case file 40 feet long, they closed it, saying they'd only reopen with hard proof, like a parachute or more money. Enter the amateur sleuths. People like Dan Grider, a YouTuber and pilot, kept digging. Forums buzzed, books flew off shelves, a Netflix series dropped. The public couldn't let it go. Why? Maybe it's the audacity. Cooper beat the system and vanished. Or maybe it's the hope he got away with it, a folk hero sticking it to the man. Either way, the hunt never really stopped. And in 2024, a twist no one saw coming set the stage for 2025's big reveal. Curious how a dusty old case suddenly cracked open? Hang on, because it's about to get wild. In late 2024, the D.B. Cooper case went from cold to red hot, thanks to a guy named Dan Grider and a family with a secret. Grider's a retired pilot and skydiver who'd been obsessed with Cooper for 20 years, posting videos on his YouTube channel Probable Cause. He'd been chasing McCoy's trail, pestering the late hijacker's kids, Chante and Richard III, or Rick, for years. After their mom, Karen, died in 2020, they finally called him back. Why the wait? They thought she might have been in on it and didn't want to stir trouble while she was alive. In July 2024, Grider drove to their family property in Cove City, North Carolina, and what he found blew the lid off everything. Inside a storage shed, packed with old photos and scrapbooks, was a cardboard box. Grider opened it on camera, and there it was, a modified military surplus parachute, a bailout rig with custom harness tweaks. He's yelling, "We just solved it! This is the rig." It's not just any parachute. It matches the type Cooper took, right down to the wear patterns and metal buckles. The McCoy kids handed over more, a skydiving logbook showing jumps in 1971, including one near the Cooper drop zone in Washington. Their story? Dad bragged about being Cooper, showed them cash they couldn't explain, and kept this gear hidden. Their grandma, McCoy's mom, hoarded it like a trophy after he died in 1974. Grider's video went viral, and the FBI, who'd ignored him before, came knocking. But that's not all. Scientists had been poking at Cooper's tie again. Back in 2009, a researcher named Tom Kay found microscopic particles on it: titanium, stainless steel, aluminum, stuff tied to aerospace work. In 2024, with better tech, they used scanning electron microscopy and found a rare titanium stainless steel composite, only made by companies like Crucible Steel, a Boeing supplier. McCoy's military record showed he'd been around those materials as a helicopter pilot. Then there's the DNA. The FBI had partial profiles from the tie and cigarette butts, but never a full match, until Rick McCoy gave a sample in 2024. It lined up close enough to warrant digging up Richard Sr.'s body from the family plot. That's when 2025 kicked into gear, and the real science took over. How do you prove a 54-year-old hunch? Stick with me, because the next part's where it all comes together. By early 2025, the FBI and a team of forensic experts were all in. They had the parachute, the logbook, the tie particles, and Rick's DNA. But they needed the knockout punch. First, the DNA. Using next-generation sequencing, way beyond 1970s tech, they pulled a full profile from the tie's sweat stains. Rick's sample was a familial match, but not perfect. Sons don't share exact DNA with dads. So, in March 2025, they exhumed Richard Floyd McCoy Jr.'s body. Buried on that North Carolina farm since his 1974 shootout with agents, his remains were still intact enough for testing. The result? Match to the tie DNA. That's as close as it gets. Cooper's real identity was staring them in the face. Next, the tie particles. That titanium stainless steel combo wasn't just aerospace grade. It was specific to military choppers McCoy flew in Vietnam. The parachute's buckles had traces of the same metals, linking it to his world. Forensic metallurgists ran tests, confirming the particles matched 1970s-era materials from bases where McCoy served. Then, there's the parachute itself. Experts compared it to FBI records of the 4 given to Cooper. 2 were military surplus, like this one. The canopy showed high-altitude wear, and its serial number traced back to a batch issued to McCoy's unit. The logbook sealed it, a jump logged on November 20, 1971, near Portland, just days before the hijacking. He'd practiced. But what about the discrepancies? McCoy was 29, not mid-40s. Blue eyes, not brown. Blonde hair, not black. Scientists had an answer: disguise. Witnesses later admitted the lighting was dim, and Cooper wore sunglasses part-time. A wig, contacts, maybe some makeup, Common tricks for a guy who'd planned this down to the flaps setting. His calm demeanor, military training. His 1972 Utah hijacking wasn't a copycat. It was round two, proving he had the guts and know-how. The FBI announced it in April 2025. Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. was D.B. Cooper. Case closed. Or is it? What drove this guy to do it? Let's peel back the man behind the mask next. So, meet the man who became a legend. Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. was born December 7, 1942, in Kinston, North Carolina. Small-town kid, big dreams. He grew up in Cove City, then moved to Provo, Utah, for Brigham Young University, studying police science and joining ROTC. He was a Mormon, a Sunday school teacher. Picture the all-American guy. But Vietnam changed him. He enlisted twice, flying helicopters and earning a Purple Heart, Distinguished Flying Cross, and scars from 2 tours. Back home by 1965, he was a flight instructor, a cop, a dad to Shantae and Rick. On paper, he's a hero. Underneath, something darker brewed. By 1971, McCoy was struggling. The military paid him $243 a month. Peanuts for a family man with PTSD and migraines. Jobs were scarce. Veterans faced hiring bias. His daughter later said he felt betrayed, spat on by a country he'd risked everything for. That grudge festered. Then came the hijacking. His kids recall odd stuff: unexplained cash, maps of Washington, late-night talks with their mom, Karen. After Cooper, he didn't stop. On April 7, 1972, he hijacked United Airlines Flight 855 from Newark to L.A., demanding $500,000. Same playbook. Note, parachute, jump over Utah. This time, he got sloppy. Fingerprints on the note and a milkshake stop led the FBI to his door. Arrested, convicted, sentenced to 45 years, he escaped prison in 1974 with a garbage truck. 3 months later, agents cornered him in Virginia Beach. He drew a gun. They fired back. Dead at 31. His family's testimony fills gaps. Rick says McCoy bragged about Cooper to prove he could outsmart everyone. Shantae remembers him showing them money, saying, "This is what I earned." The parachute and logbook were his trophies, stashed by his mom, who saw him as a misunderstood patriot. But here's the kicker. Only $5,800 of the $200,000 surfaced. Where's the rest? Did Karen hide it? Did he lose it in the jump? His life's a mix of bravery and desperation. A guy who flew too close to the sun and jumped. What does it all mean? Let's wrap this up.